Good morning. My name is James Stanger, and this video is a talk for the MMARC meeting in 3.0 in Jaipur in June. It's a part of my KPI and IVF series, and this one is on how to develop a standard operating procedure for managing KPIs. So to start off with, the Bible, everyone should have a copy of this manuscript. Make Sharon and Dave Mortimer rich. I have to say it's an excellent book, but it's very, very intensive. If you follow all the recommendations in it, it can be immensely time consuming. But it's a reference for there's a fantastic chapter on SOPs. But another one you may like to look at is a recently published one, 2024, in IBM Online, A Good Practice in Clinical Embryology, where they basically describe the actions of SOP, which I'm sure has been discussed elsewhere in the meeting. But all SOPs should be on the basis of all laboratory activities should be carried out according to a written SOP in line with the Centre's quality management system. They should be version controlled and approved by the head of the laboratory and quality department. They should include the scope and purpose, the equipment and consumables as required, and the protocols. They should be reviewed every 2 years, and obsolete versions should be removed. And there should be regular competency assessment of staff should be performed at intervals of no more than 2 years to ensure compliance to the SOP. But having said that, in a large multi-lab unit, a dedicated quality management officer can manage all the requirements of this, including the reviews and auditing, which are enormously time-consuming. But in a smaller clinic, a quality management system can overwhelm anybody, as it overwhelmed me many times. So my advice is to keep the quality management system to a manageable size. And reviewing all the SOPs and auditing that all staff have read it is really, really hard. And you can spend enormous amounts of work writing all the SOPs, but getting all the staff to read it and follow it is very difficult. Now, the SOP for KPIs is something quite different. It's only actually really designed for if for one person, and if that person leaves, then the SOPs for if the KPIs is actually the basis for anyone else to take over and to maintain the integrity of the reporting. But you just need to keep everything in balance about your accreditation needs, how much time you spend on that against all your other needs. So once again, it's just a small part of the SOPs is the management of key performance indicators, but I think it's important. And if I think about it and think about how many quality management systems I've written in the past, because I'm biased because I've always done it, of course, is that I think the KPI one is just maybe only a small part of the whole quality management system, but I think it's the important part. I think it's a rudder of the ship, and it's a common language for all staff to use to reference the success of the clinic. It's a warning bell for trouble. It takes all the hyperbole out of the clinic's importance. It basically tells you what the clinic is actually doing, but it's also pride of one's performance because you can see in proof how successful you are. It's a baseline to try and do better. But the SOP for KPIs is based on two elements. There is the standard operating procedure component, which has all these different attributes, which I'll go through one at a time. And I just need to very quickly talk about for each KPI, if you're going to write a KPI that other people can follow, they can see how you're making your conclusions. And if you leave and someone else takes over, you know exactly how the data has been collected. You need to create a appendix for each KPI that has certain attributes. And this is the one the one I wrote my last clinic I was in, and I know it's over the top, right? But it makes you go back and think about the value of the KPI. It's where it's known, its location, definition of what it's for, having the status, how it's calculated, where the data comes from, frequency of collection, who it reports to, the benchmark value, that is the value you may aspire to if you want to do it, and a competency value, which is the lower level of which you won't accept that's a lower level that everyone should work above. The range, the action value, where something may trigger a deviation, the type of response to deviation, comments, and a reference if it's come from another journal. If you go to the Vienna Consensus in 2017, list of laboratory performance indicators, this is the list they give. It's quite basic, but actually very good. And in fact, it's not a good, so it's good base from which to start working from. But as you've seen some of my other talks, you can generate lots and lots of different KPIs. Of course, this is at the top, but each one's got relevance. You look at patient demographics, number of transfers, cryo storage, quality aspects, clinical demographics, complications, pregnancy, activity trends, like how many new pickups there are per registrations, witnessing, risk KPI, staff KPIs, staff skill KPIs, and the last clinic I even created a system of allocating like hours, work hours allocated to each activity, and then you can generate the theoretically amount of hours per activity of the staff, and you can have a measure which is scarf per work hours. So you have some form of time and motion study. And this is one of the definitions. This is a fairly common one. This is blastocysts per 2 PN outside injected. It's a key one, which I'll explain in a minute. And definition of good blastocysts per mature oocyte inseminated. It's calculated by day 5 blastocysts, grade 4 and above, A beta intercell mass and A beta ectoderm. You can generate from the patient management systems, time-lapse data or worksheet. Measured continuously. That is, you look at it every day. It's an ongoing rolling score, but at least monthly. Report the scientists. The benchmark value is 50%. The competency value, that is anything below 30%. That's what we should aspire to, above 30%. It's for women under 35 years of age, which for women under 35 years of age, 40% would be the expected value you should aim for. Anything less than 20% would trigger a response, etc. And the second one that I'm not going to do anymore. This is one which I think I'm becoming more and more interested in since I've been doing my third aid YouTube videos and looking at the IVF in a different world. I think the risk KPI is one of the critical ones, and this one is for client identification, the misreading of data between client tags and dishes, etc. And you can see the remote mark value is 0, competency value 0.01%. It's a laboratory incident. Review all staff involved and clarify policy procedures. This KPI tracks the number of times a dish is placed in the work area that differs from the client tag. And I think I've talked about this in another video. Let me put that to one side because I only got 20 minutes and come back to developing or writing what I would think is a SOP for KPIs. And it goes something like this. I'm sorry, I was just a bit quick then. The primary aim of a KPI, in my view, is the reassurance that the clinic in all its processes is under control and in balance. So the primary aim of it is not to find errors, etc. The primary aim is to reassure everyone that the clinic is working as it's meant to be. There is no major issues in the laboratory or anywhere which causes an issue for the clinic. But there are a lot of secondary aims, which includes the basis for improvement, is to record and document shifting attitudes in clinical practice. Those if a new doctor joins and all these cases do ICSI, that will be reflected in the IVF ICSI ratios. Identification of circumstances that have a deviation from the expected performance, and that will only be a few critical KPIs. The identification of a critical incident that may affect the productivity or the reputation of the clinic. And the last point, and I think now this is the most important one of all going forward, is to anticipate risk and create and manage KPIs as to provide the clinic with information on the degree of the risk that will affect the viability and the reputation of the clinic and its staff. And we've seen that with Monash IVF in Australia. The purpose, of course, is to create, manage, and report a series of key performance indicators to cover all aspects of the clinic's activity. And I know this talk is about laboratory, but the KPI should in fact be for all parts of the clinic, not just the lab. And the aim is to provide the clinic with basic information. Should be to selected staff or all staff, identifying the number of clients mixes, procedures, and outcomes. This will mean all staff use the same information when dealing with clients and other patients, but the information should be considered confidential unless otherwise stated. So, for instance, if the KPI produces a pregnancy rate for women under 35 on their first attempt, then the doctor can look at the KPI and everyone will quote the same figure. So you don't have doctors misquoting, giving incorrect risks, etc. But The whole, from my point of view anyway, the whole management of KPI should be under one staff member, preferably a senior laboratory staff member, for the collection, validation, and liaison with the senior executive. There should be a page for each key performance indicator reporting. So the SOP would say, in liaison with the senior executive, which is now your common theme I'm making here, is that everything you do in a KPI should be designed to be presented and done in conjunction with some senior executive. So in fact, the senior executive is kind of aware exactly what's happening. It doesn't mean all KPIs are done with it, but the senior executive is the person that the KPIs are meant to be reported. That is the destination of all SOP, all KPIs. In liaison with the senior executive, the KPI supervisor shall prepare and present a defined set of clinical KPIs to the senior executive for a specific meeting at regular intervals as requested by the senior executive. At relevant staff meetings as approved by the senior, so you might have one on embryology, you might do one for nursing, etc. And I can tell you all the people in different groups are all really interested in the statistics, but at least annually and preferably monthly or quarterly. But the important point I would make in your SOP is that all reports, when presented, should be signed off by the senior executive to confirm that they've been reviewed. No point producing a KPI that has some adverse outcome and the executive saying, sorry, I didn't know about this. The important thing is that part of the process is they should sign off it at the meeting. So the frequency of reporting, and I think some people may find this to be different, but this is how I have viewed it. The frequency of reporting of KPIs, the supervisor will determine the frequency for each KPI being reviewed. And I think there are three critical ones. There's a critical one where you monitor daily. This would say the fertilization rate or the day 3 grade A 8-cell embryo. So if coming out of your patient management system, you should look at the fertilization rate every day for your key performance indicators. You put them in an Excel spreadsheet, even that's a pain, but you can then plot it out and then you're in a position to identify if there's a flaw. So this one is designed for identifying catastrophic errors. The key performance indicators, they should be monitored monthly, and the key performance one, the key one is that they are a select subgroup that are not impacted by client variabilities. All other KPIs you can monitor monthly, biannual, or annually as indicated, and it will apply to all KPIs. Okay, I'm getting a bit fast here. The KPI lists. There can be a number of specific KPI lists relevant to different clinic areas, as I've shown you before, but there must be a primary list developed by the supervisor and the senior executive that meets the need of the clinics in terms of understanding the activity of the clinic, understanding the success of the clinic in terms of clinical pregnancy rates and live birth, and any other area deemed by the senior executive to represent a future or current or future risk. So there needs to be a primary list of all the KPIs. But the KPI list is responsible for any other list, and these should be developed in conjunction with relevant staff to encourage participation awareness. And I make the point that the clinic is not just an embryology lab, even though you probably all are embryologists at this meeting, but the IVF clinic is made up of lots of different laboratories and units, and you should have KPIs running in each of those to assess activity and risk. And there should, a major part is response to deviations. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this is an important part. And it says something like the KPI supervisor, together with senior executive, should indicate which KPIs require response to a deviation and the implication of that deviation. So not all KPIs will require control limits and therefore have no deviation review. Some are just monitoring activity, but this can change over time. Minor deviations may require just a note to indicate has been observed. Moderate deviations may require a specific incident form to be completed that will pass through the quantity management oversight. A significant deviation that implies clinical legal risk may require an incident form to be completed that will pass to the senior executive. And the KPI will retain a log of all incidents, actions, and follow-ups that may prompt a revision of the KPI list and documentation. So the KPI supervisor will create and maintain a register of all KPIs as per quality management system. And we've also indicated what each KPI should be composed of, so I don't need to repeat myself there. And I'd like to come back to the types of KPI because I think this is actually a really important point. Not all KPIs require the same level of oversight. In fact, most of them are just a bit of interesting information which someone you can collect. And if it's coming out of the patient management system, it's just basically padding to let you know what's happening. But there are a couple of critical ones which I think I need to document in the SOP. And the first one is a critical KPI that requires daily monitoring as well as monthly and annual reporting. And they are the ones which tell you if you suddenly you've got a bad batch of oil or something's catastrophic happening, and the staff will be telling you there's something wrong, but you need to be able to confirm it. And usually the fertilization rate, embryo development should be monitored daily as the data goes in the patient management system. The key points the key KPIs are for monthly review and reporting. Standard KPIs are reported as required, but then there are risk KPIs which should be reviewed as required, but usually every quarter, I should imagine. And then the reference KPIs, which I've talked about before, which is really just done annually. I just need to come back and just go through these again, then I'm almost finished, Mr. Chairman. The critical KPIs are designed to monitor and detect any catastrophic event that may lead to a critical incident. For instance, faulty culture media, oil, equipment failure, infection, or environmental issues. These are detected from a significant deviation from the normal. And for examples of these, you need to nominate these for IVF fertilization rates and reduced or failed embryo development. And they're all based on data, usually collected historically or some other benchmark data with a mean standard deviation, and it's plotted out in a Shedwell chart or a Levi-Jennings chart, standard deviation from the mean, where you can very quickly pick up if there is a deviation, but the baseline value doing it cannot be influenced by the deviations. The baseline value should be something which is retrospective. Now, I think this is the other really important one. The key KPIs are ones that are designed to monitor and detect trends in performance that may lead to a critical incidents. For instance, fewer euploid embryos or fewer blasters. They're not critical, but they reflect a low level of performance. They are limited to a specific subgroup of clients that are not affected by client variables such as age or poor ovarian reserve and meant to reflect culture conditions. And they should contain sufficient number of data points to make meaningful observations that can be reviewed as desired, but done at least monthly. Then the risk KPIs, I know I'm probably repeating myself a bit here, but the supervisor, together with senior staff in support laboratory and other departments, should be create and manage a set of critical risk KPIs to reflect any perceived short-term or long-term existential risk. The aim is to identify a limited number of critical risks that can be managed with the purpose to minimize these risks for future staff in the clinic. The second aim, of course, will be to provide assurance to clients about their concerns of these risks, for instance, cryostorage of oocytes or embryos, or gametes and embryo misinformation. And the last one, the reference one, I think this is I haven't always done this. I've only used it in my last clinic I worked at before I retired. But there should be one or two KPIs that you can take from a national publication set of data in Australia. There's the NPSU that's reported every year. And you pick out one or two or three KPIs which benchmark against the published national one to demonstrate that you are concerned. For instance, one would be the percentage of ICSI cases relative to IVF. And lastly, Mr. Chairman, I just want to talk briefly about data acquisition storage. The data used to create all KPIs must be robust and defined. That is, you have to be able to know where it's come from, and someone else has to be able to replicate the data if it's important. It's preferred if the data is recovered from the patient management system or a separate Excel spreadsheet and should be saved and be protected for future study and reference. It may be preferable if the data is retained in a dedicated data table together with controlled data and appropriate means and standard deviation. So anyone can come back and historically look at the performance of the clinic, because in a funny way, this is actually a really important part, being able to see how far you've come. And consideration should be given to whether the data used to develop the upper and lower control limits be continuous or there is a policy for using previous data. And I think for the key KPIs, you have to be very clear what you're using as a baseline so you can demonstrate if there is a deviation. So just to finish up, Mr. Chairman, the quality management system is essential for all clinics for many reasons, and the standard operating procedure section on KPIs is a natural and important part of that activity. Quality management system clinic KPI functions can consume an enormous amount of time and staff hours. And That cannot be understated. I know it's important, but it can be overdone. And I've seen some clinics where the KPIs are consume so much time they become self-defeating. And the auditing of staff's reading of the quality management system when starting and for each update can be a really difficult thing to do unless it's fully automated. And in fact, I started writing a database to do that once day, but I got sidetracked. And so just to finish up, Mr. Chairman, the quality management does not need to be complicated, but please pursue the key performance indicators with enthusiasm and additional minor ones because you have an inquiring mind and a desire to understand and improve the clinic's performance. I'm sure others would prefer a SOP and a client to KPI list that would differ from what I've presented. So leave a comment if this is actually my YouTube video and others can learn, but we can do that in discussion. And this one, I'd like to thank you. As I say in all my videos, all my talks, I know IVF is a personal journey that involves the action of many ideas, staff techniques, etc. And KPIs are just one of them. And it helps to understand all aspects of that journey. So at this point in time, I will, today I'll just go to that to go back. And say thank you and goodbye.